Good evening and welcome to all of my participants here for this webinar and interview and a little chit chat with Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. Before we start, two things. First of all, I have to inform that the coordinator and moderator of this interview, Mr. Rahul Pawar, was unable to come because there has been a medical emergency at his residence. So there will be just the two of us today. And the second thing is a brief introduction to USP. USP is, it stands for Ujjwal System of Productivity and Positivity. It's a system which uses a trademark technique called mimetic resonance to get into your thoughts into action and how your thoughts can affect your well-being, your happiness, as also the direction in which things go. And that's a technique which we have developed over the last 10 years. And USP essentially trains people in utilizing and using this technique. And USP was the spirit, that the whole spirit of this series of Into the Mind of an Achiever is the brainchild of all our colleagues at USP, that we must bring to people the insights of people who have succeeded, who have achieved something, who had many facets to their lives. So let me introduce Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. He's an IAS officer of the 1985 batch, multifaceted personality. He started his journey as a journalist. And from there on, he got into the civil services. And from the civil services, he was instrumental in a lot of policy decisions, especially when the state of Uttaranchal was created. He is the one who really brought a lot of very, very important changes in the policy, the industrialization policy and development of that state. He contributed magnificently to that. Apart from that, his parent cadre is West Bengal, so he's had many stints there, and he's worked in the West Bengal government also, again looking after commerce, industries. And another side to his personality is, of course, yes, he also worked in the horticulture and agriculture sector. So, you know, the development, as they say, of any nation is based on industries and agriculture. So he has had a taste of both, and he has contributed to both these sectors. Apart from this, he's a very good writer, and he encourages young talent. He encourages talent towards literature. He is the main chief patron of the Valley of Words, about which I'm sure he will tell us a little bit about that. And he is right now also in the scheme of the maps of India. That's another very interesting thing in which he's trying to bring together the nation as an integrated whole by focusing on very, very minute issues on certain states, so that we all know what is happening in our country in all different corners. So it will be a pleasure to hear all this from Dr. Sanjeev Chopra. Sanjeev Chopra ji is my batchmate from the IAS.
Yes,
so,
that's the most important introduction. That's the most important introduction, Ujjwal, that we are batchmates.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, there could have been no one in a conversation between us. So in a way, I'm glad that we are talking to each other, and we don't actually need somebody to
moderate. No, the only thing was when batchmates get together, it becomes difficult to moderate them. We may fly off the handle.
That is true. That is true.
Well, Sanjeev, to begin with, I must say that you had a very interesting journey. You know, starting from Kapurthala cantonment, and all the way, you know, you travel to Mumbai, then to Delhi, Dehradun, and from Mussoorie, you know, on the way to Kolkata and to, you know, Darjeeling. You had a great stint in many places. Now, how was this journey? How do you feel about this journey?
So I feel it's absolutely fantastic, you know, because the ability to be able to speak in so many languages, to have talked to so many people, to have had so many situations, it's absolutely wonderful. In fact, this morning I was in a discussion on languages and the new education policy. And so I started by speaking in Punjabi, which I said is my mother tongue. Yeah. Then I broke out into Hindi. Then I spoke a little bit in Bangla. And then I ended up in English. And if there was time, I would have spoken a little bit of Gurkhali as well. Very little. Wow. But I think it's so interesting, because the more we travel, the more situations we are in. And if you have an open mind, you learn a lot, So I think it's been really wonderful. In fact, the most interesting thing, that especially in the IAS, you get posted to places you never heard of. I mean, I had not heard of Purulia when I got posted to Purulia. Then I was posted to Kalimpong, and when we were engaged at that time, and when Rashmi wanted to book a trunk call to Kalimpong, they said that, they connect calls only within India, and even the operator thought that Kalimpong is some country way or beyond. So I think it's been a fascinating journey, and being in the IAS itself and being in the 85 batch of the IAS has been even more special. And as you know, that our batch itself is a very unique batch. Of course, every batch thinks that way, but there's no harm in us saying that we are absolutely unique, because no batch has a USP, No batch has a USP which is registered. So we have a registered USP in our batch. So that way, our batch is great.
Wonderful. In fact, we have the privilege of and the distinction of having the earlier Lieutenant Governor of Jammu Kashmir and now the CAG from
with us, yes.
And of course, there are many more, but then these are the well.
And many more to come, Let's put it like this.
Yes, sure. Okay, Sanjeev, you have been very fond of literature and books. What would you, because I find these days that people have now sort of become so much used to looking at the screen all the time, and reading of books and literature has somewhere, it's fallen by the wayside, or somehow it's not being taken up. What do you think about that? Since you are with the Valley of Words, what is your take on literature? And especially since your journey started off from a small town, what are your experiences and what would you like to tell us about that?
No, you see, I don't think that the habit of reading is going down. I think a lot of young people are reading. A lot of young people are certainly writing, and writing is certainly increasing. And you have many ways in which people are writing. Earlier, writing was a very formal affair. I mean, so you had to have a tome before you could think of writing. Now you write through blogs, you write through poetry. I mean, so writing is basically creative, and certainly the way in which you look at books has changed. I mean, our generation, we were so fond of, picking up books and reading. But a lot of young people like to read on the Kindle, they like to read on the net. And in fact, if you look at it, you see today, Ujjwal, when we were OTs, for example, we never thought that we would switch over from writing to, keying in our thoughts. But now, even when I write an article, I don't think I use the paper and pen. Paper and pen is kept to take some notes, but most of our creative work is now straight onto this. So I think every generation has its own way of putting its thoughts together. So but if you think, if you ask me, I think the number of books that are being written and published and read today, it's certainly at par with what we were doing in our times. So because I get to read a lot of books and I get to see a lot of books, I somehow or the other don't agree with this general perception that the generation has started is not reading as much as it used to in our times. It's possible that other mediums have also developed. What has happened is that other mediums which had not developed so much in our time, those have really picked up. Actually what has happened was that earlier there used to be gossip sessions, there used to be adda, there used to be people walking into each other's rooms and spending a lot of time. Now that time has been taken over by the WhatsApp. You see, so that sort of time, remember as joint secretaries, when you used to come to Delhi, that was the pre-WhatsApp age. Often you would, with 2-3 batchmates would get together, go out for a cup of tea or coffee. Now, I think that socialization has moved online. But serious reading, I think, or at least I would like to believe that it continues. So I have grown up with books, you see, and I think the reason is that my father really gave me a very tempting offer. I used to get a pocket money of, I think, 2 rupees a week or 3 rupees a week. I think it was 2 rupees a week. And he said that if you spend the money on books, then the same amount, very typically Sarkari fashion, he said that if you buy a book of 2 rupees, you get another 2 rupees. So, I think that's how the habit of going to a bookstore and picking up books, that started. And that's been in good stead throughout my life. So I've always enjoyed going to a bookstore. I've always enjoyed being in a library. So I think and when you visit bookstores, when you visit libraries, then I think you get attracted to books. And so the journey sort of continues.
Okay. What difference did you perceive? See, we have a slightly similar background. I grew up in Jharkhand. I came down to Delhi quite, for my graduation and all. You also grew up in Kapurthala, it's cantonment town. You came on to Mumbai. You had your beginnings in a small area, and then came down to bigger cities. I'm sure a lot of our audience are from the Mofussil areas, and a lot of young people who want to, grow out and achieve better career prospects. So, what was your experience? What would you like to tell them? And how was your experience in this shift from the, the knowledge base and other things?
You see, I think one is that I sometimes, life takes its own turn. I mean, frankly, if I had been, straight out of school, if I had been 16 years of age, I would have moved into Delhi University. More specifically, I would have loved to join St. Stephen's College. But it didn't happen. It didn't happen because I was underage at that point of time. And I think it was, in a way, it was very good, because if I had gone to Stephen's straight out of my higher secondary, I would not have gone into the entire corpus of Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu reading and writing. It was only because I had to stay back in Jalandhar. And when you stayed back in Jalandhar, then the influence of that city, the influence of the colleges in that city, the influence of colleges which are the non-elite colleges, that sort of impacts you. And it suddenly hits you that the world that you're living in is actually a bubble. So it was only when I joined Khalsa College that my introduction to Punjabi, my introduction to Hindi, my introduction to Hindustani writing, that improved. And I would not have read. Maybe I would have read some different things if I had gone to Delhi University. But I think it's very important, and I don't think there's anything. I think wherever you are, if you keep your eyes and ears open, and if you're involved in the ecosystem, if you're involved in the debating circuit, if you're involved in the intellectual discussion circuit, then you will pick up those things. For instance, if you're living in Punjab, and you hadn't read Amrita Preetham, if you hadn't read Rajinder Singh Bedi, if you hadn't read Ek Chadar Meli Si, if you hadn't read Shiv Batalvi, if you couldn't quote Iqbal, if you couldn't quote Hafiz Jalandhari, if you couldn't quote Sahir Ludhianvi, living in that area, how could you participate in a debate? I mean, how could one make a point? So in debating, in discussions and conversations, so where you are, if you are interested, you pick up a lot of that nuance. And every region in this country, or for that matter, every region in the world is so full of literature. It's so full of life, because wherever there's life, there'll be literature, there'll be poetry, there'll be joy, there'll be sorrow, there'll be agony, there'll be ecstasy, and there'll be people who will write about this in very creative ways. So I think that's what I'm very glad that I spent my formative years in Jalandhar, and I was born in Kapurthala. I studied and stayed in Jalandhar Cant, that is so. So I think that makes a lot of difference. So I was quite happy being there. And I think one more factor which was there was that I must say that my father was in the BSF, and there were two very scholarly officers there in the IPS at that time. One was Mr. Ashwini Kumar. He had a big collection of books, and he was a very voracious reader. So naturally, after he would read the books, and also I would go to the library and pick up the thing. That's how I think the beginning of the maps project also started. There was to go and see my father in the control room, and I would see the maps, and I would see that this checkpost here, this checkpost there. So I was very fascinated with the maps, I think. And then one forgot about it, and then again after 35 years, 40 years, again those things resurrected, and I got fascinated with maps all over again. So I mean, that's the way it moves on. We never know what little incident in life is going to change us. What little influence in life is going to make us realize that you have to think differently, and so I think as we go along we'll discuss.
Yes, of course. The topic of today's main focus is on emerging growth opportunities. You worked a lot in the development sector, and as I was introducing you, I realized that agriculture and industries, you had your share of contribution in both these sectors. What do you envisage? What do you look when you look at India for our young people? We have a lot of youngsters in the audience. So what do you foresee as the opportunities available in the coming years? Of course, to this year is very peculiar, as we all know. But keep that aside. Let's look at India in this century, in this decade. How do you think things will move on? What will be the opportunities available?
You see, I think one of the real opportunity is in the rural, it's in the agri, it's in the agri-horti, it is in the agri-business sector, because so far what has been happening is, that India is now making a transition from being a country of scarcity into a country of plenty. Well, one may not use the word plenty, but certainly we are moving from a regime of scarcity to a regime where nothing is scarce. So which means that, earlier, in fact, all our rural economy has been, it's more, if one was to use a term, it's more like, potatoes in a sack. I mean, the sense that there is no specialization. I mean, there was no incentive to specialize in producing great rural products. But now, as you notice in Nashik, I mean, the grapes have really transformed the landscape of Nashik. I mean, the kinus have transformed the landscape of Abohar. So what's going to happen is that from being, what was happening was that our knowledge that the agriculture system was driven by the state. It was driven, so you produced for the FCI, you produced for the NEFED, you produced for the PANSAP, and therefore quality and other things were not really a consideration. Today, the market is getting very differentiated. So today there's a market for high quality pomegranates, there's a market for high quality, and you name it, you have it, So this is where the new growth opportunity to my mind is, and that is, and linked, if we do this along with, newer production techniques, micro irrigation, land mapping, land consolidation, in fact, some of the real challenges for us today in the area of agriculture is that a lot of our land is suboptimally utilized. Because of our land laws, because of our various problems, and certainly in areas. Let's take Punjab and Kerala as examples, where the labor rate is very, very high. So therefore, what is happening is that a lot of land is not even under the plow because it is no longer economical to grow conventional wheat and rice. So these are all areas where you'll have to do organic. You may produce Gobindabhog rice. You can produce, high quality stuff. So that's one area which I think, although the government has done a lot in terms of policy intervention, but I think somewhere along the line, both in the policy circles, in the corporate circles, it's no longer very, very fascinating to look back at the rural. We are all moving towards the cities. We all think that urbanization is the answer. To my mind, migration, yes. But all over urbanization, maybe no. I think, in fact, this IT bandwidth and this road connectivity and this rural connectivity should usher in rural prosperity in a very large order. If I had my way, I would pump in investments into rural connectivity, both physical connectivity, IT connectivity, knowledge connectivity, because that's where the growth lies. That's where the potential is. And somehow or the other, because somehow or the other, I think almost all political parties like to focus on the urban because it's more consolidated. Therefore, I think that the growth opportunities will be there now, and it has to be driven by agro-industries. It has to be more knowledge-based. It has to be more knowledge-driven. So I think that's what will be the real lever of change in this country.
Yeah, because I guess what you're saying is that there is a huge potential of people.
Absolutely huge potential of people, and people who have to, given a little bit of tweaking, given a little bit of knowledge. You see, take for instance, today, of course, Maharashtra is the biggest producer of bananas. Now you could be transporting bananas to Delhi, or you could be transporting them in raw form in various parts of the country. You could have ripening chambers there. You could do a lot of things, and in fact, as our incomes grow, as our food profiles change, that's where the and some or the other, I think we are just at the cusp of change, because the academy is now doing a project with to see how we can improve transparency in procurement operation and things. So once we have transparent procurement, once we have a good warehousing system, I think, and actually the main thing, why people want to move to cities is because the opportunities are not there. I mean, so if you have good schools, if you've got good medical centers, and in fact, if we were to change the way we look at medicine, if we were to change the way we see today, for instance, we are all looking at thinking that unless you have a big hospital, things. So we need to change all that. It's a big mindset change that we all have to get into, and that will happen, and that is happening only when a nation becomes more confident about itself, when it becomes more confident about its past, when it becomes more confident about its knowledge systems. And I think that's very important. The strengthening of belief in yourself is so very important. And I think that's an area that, we all have to work together.
Excellent, Sanjeev. Excellent. Because, well, in USP, my main thrust is on belief. If you get what you believe in, and that's how the science of thoughts operate. And you wonderfully said this, that if the nation believes in itself, and that's it. Once you get confidence, that's it.
Yeah. So I think that's very, very important. So once that starts happening, once we are more confident about our languages, once we are more confident about the way, a very simple thing, like we talk in terms of the Gregorian calendar. We don't even use, very few people would be knowing that today it's Shravan, or that we are moving into which month of the year, because we are so used to talking in terms of the Gregorian calendar. We've lost our connect with the moon, we've lost our connect with the sun, we've lost our, I see all this because I'm happily in Mussoorie where I can see all this. In Bombay, you don't get to see it. You don't get to see it. So, the connect is so important.
Yeah. Well, one thing, a lot of people are usually interested to know is working styles. Now, that's one thing, because I know you work with a lot of people of stature. Would you like to highlight something about working style of certain people, or let's say people in the forefront of leadership? What are your experiences? How would you say about the working styles? And what did you learn from them? And what can we learn from that?
You see, I think working styles are also linked to the situation you are in and the environment you are in. You see, for instance, when I was working in Darjeeling district, it was a district where you had the GNLF agitation, and it required a different kind of decision making. It required a single shot decision making. When you're in a development administration, you're trying to build consensus, you require a different leadership style. In the academy, you have a different leadership style as the secretary. Industries, you have a different style as secretary. Agriculture, you again have to change your style. So I think it's the leadership is also a function of where you are situated, what you are doing, and what portfolio you hold at that particular point of time. But let me say that one of the main questions which all of us in the bureaucracy have is, what is our interaction with the political leadership? How do we come across them? How do we interact with them? How do they interact with us? Do they respect us? Do we respect them? So my assessment is that I have been very fortunate in the sense that my current minister, Dr. Jitendra Singh, I enjoy a wonderful rapport with him. In fact, he's very fond of books, and one learns a lot of things because one understands, when you look at people at the central level, that they look at things from an all India perspective, from a different perspective. One thing which you always have to pick up things from. If you are interested in learning, you will learn from. In fact, one instance which I will like to share with you is that last year on the Diamond Jubilee of the Academy, when he had come here and he was saying, I said that, 60 years of the Academy. And he just paused and said, Sanjeev, 60 years is something in the life of an individual. What is 60 years in the life of an institution? And what is 60 years in the life of a nation? And what is 60 years in a civilizational term? Now, that sort of connected you and that thing. Immediately before that, I was working with an entirely different person, Mamata Banerjee. It was, people say it's very difficult to work with her, but I found that it's okay. I mean, it's not, one could sort of, what I learned there was that, you can do anything by saying that we have been taught by the Chief Minister to be fearless and bold. And because she's taught us to be fearless and bold, let's put it on record that this is right. So again, what I would say is that as a bureaucrat, we've got to change our working style with the political leadership that we get to work. Now, before that, I've had a wonderful, then of course, Mr. Sharad Pawar, what a person. His grasp of information, his understanding of the rural reality, his understanding of, and look at it, his understanding of everything from agriculture to cricket to politics.
Yes.
And phenomenal. So I think we got to understand that the political leadership in this country, that this general myth that, they don't know anything and we know all, that doesn't work. In fact, I learned a lot from him. Punctuality, in fact, I would place on record that all political leaders that I've seen, from Dr. Jitendra Singh to Mamata Banerjee to N.D. Tiwari to Sharad Pawar to Buddhadev Bhattacharya, all of them have been extremely punctual and extremely conscious of their time. They have respected their time and they respect your time as well. So and I've enjoyed working with Mr. N.D. Tiwari. Again, a person who was, from him one learned that one has to be gracious. One has to be gracious to, there are no permanent enemies, so you have to be gracious to whoever you're talking to. And to the extent that you can help people without violating your norms, you should do it. And I've enjoyed working with Mr. Buddhadev Bhattacharya also. In a way, working with people across the political spectrum. In terms of personality styles for officers, some of the officers I've really enjoyed working with. Mr. G. Balagopal was very, very different from Mr. Patro, who was there were two DMs of Dehradun. I enjoyed working with both of them, but had very, very different working styles. The person I really admire, Dr. R.S. Tolia, my chief secretary, I learned a lot from him, but I also learned that he did not understand the nature of power. He was ousted from his position as chief secretary. You learn a lot from so many people around you. And I think that a leadership style depends on your colleagues, depends on your environment, depends on your work situation. You need a different leadership style during COVID. You need a different leadership style post-COVID. You need a different leadership style. And so that's how I would that's how I would like to respond to your question.
Well, yeah. It reminds me of the Second World War when it was Winston Churchill who was the prime minister who won the war, but soon thereafter he lost the elections. It was the people thought that Clement Attlee would be much better for the development after the war. So for winning the war, you require another style, and for development thereafter, you require another style. Well, that's what history tells us. Interesting.
Yes.
I would like you to tell us a little bit about the value of words. Now, that is because I always like to look at people, who have not only done one side, who have multifaceted personalities. So your work and value of words is something, beyond the normal routine bureaucratic life. It's something different. So would you like to tell us something about that?
Yes, thank you, Ujjwal, because you see, value of words is something that, one was attending a lot of literature festivals in Calcutta and Kasauli and, involved with, Delhi and several other places. And one always went there as a speaker, one went there as a discussant. And before that, one had been doing this books and authors at the Civil Services Officers Institute, where, in fact, I always felt that, civil servants do a lot of writing, do a lot of reading, and yet somehow or the other, we seem to be losing out in the, we weren't being invited to literature forums and to, the civil servants were not getting their due recognition as authors and as discussants and as intellectuals. So that was one thing which was always there in the back of my mind when we had started this books and authors series in CSO. That, in fact, is the beginning of this. And then after 2 or 3 years of attending festivals in various parts of the country, in one of these after literature festival, you have this little celebratory party. So one of the sponsors was telling me, was asking me that, what did you feel about it? I said, well, these are some of the changes that can be brought about, that, literature festivals are becoming glamour events, that there's less talk about books and authors, and there's more about film stars, there's more about politicians, and you want to get people who are, you create an unnecessary controversy, you create a glam, and you have a fashion show, and you have all these things. So I think that is not really literature festival. That's a bit of a tamasha. Not that tamasha should not be there. The tamasha is also very important. It's also a part of our great tradition. But I said that, look, on a serious note, we should have a literature festival where people come after having read the books that are going to be discussed. That authors should be in conversation with intelligent readership, and readers and authors should get to engage with each other. And there should be clear knowledge verticals. That is, if you are talking about writings in Hindi and contemporary, the best of contemporary writing in Hindi of that year, let there be a full panel which will discuss the best of contemporary writing in Hindi, best of contemporary writing in English, in fiction, non-fiction. So you put, so let people put their thoughts together and come to a literature festival. And of course, the festival will be a place where there'll be many things other than literature. So you will get to go to exhibitions, you'll see a little bit of philately, you'll see exhibitions, you'll have, a lot of things will be there, but there should be a core structure to a festival. And that's how I presented this idea to my friends in Dehradun. And I must acknowledge here that the entire logistics and planning is done by my better half, Rashmi, and 4 of her friends who got together and who provide this sort of wherewithal, to run this festival, because you can run with ideas, but then if you run with ideas, somebody has to sort of, force the reins and put you back. So I got a very good support from Rashmi and 4 of her friends who we call the best of Bao, and they include Sudha Joshi, Nidhi Maulik, Sonika Rawat, and Shalini Thanda. So they sort of stitch this festival together. What I do is that, and what we do in the festival is that we also realize that how do you get an objective criterion into which authors to select and which authors to not select. Because what typically happens is that after all, even when I was going to literature festivals, I'll tell somebody, "Bhai, I'd like to go to this session." Because you're an IAS officer, they'll say, "Theek hai, aap bhi aa jao." So without too much thought, and people have to be adjusted. So, if let's say that ABC Corporation has given a sponsorship, so now Ujjwal is the chairman of ABC Corporation. So Ujjwal says, "I want to be in a session with experts." Bilkul aiye, because you obviously paid the money, so you get the chair there. So I wanted to break this arbitrariness of selection, because if you notice, the same set of people go to all the literature festivals. So literature festival does not define itself. It is the people who are just celebrities. Whatever field that they come and they make. So I thought, let's break this. So let's invite nominations from established publishers. We will then select the best books that have been written in the last calendar year and celebrate those books and give a platform to the 35 top authors in the categories of Hindi fiction, Hindi non-fiction, translations from regional languages to Hindi, same for English fiction, English non-fiction, translations from regional languages to English, and writings for young adults. And another batchmate of ours, when he was the head of REC, he agreed to sponsor the REC awards. PV Ramesh.
Oh, yeah.
So Dr. Ramesh.
Yes.
So, it's Dr. Ramesh said that, if you're doing this, and what we thought was, that REC has spread light across the country. So from light, why don't we enlightenment, light to enlightenment. So that's how, and for last 3 years, therefore, we get about 400 to 500 books. There's a process of selection of these books. These 35 authors are the prime people whom we like to get and have an intensive discussion with them. So what happens is that there are colleges and universities which read these books, and you get, for instance, Wasted by Ankur Besen. Now it's a fantastic book which talks about sanitation and sanitation workers in this country. It's very, very unglamorous, right? But it's something that we need to discuss.
Yes.
Now, Geeta Harrier, now become the tide. I mean, it's talking about three students who make it on a scholarship, right? On a scholarship in the sense that they are scheduled caste students, so they make it. And the tensions which they undergo, the difficulties which they face. I mean, that Rohit Vemula's suicide again comes to the fore. There's Yashika Dutt who talks about, coming out as a Dalit, even when you use the title of Dutt. So, what happens is that you get names which are not very well known. Look, William Dalrymple has also made it to the shortlist. I mean, he is, of course, a celebrity. Everybody knows him. But along with William Dalrymple, the possibilities of being selected are equal for Yashika Dutt, who's not very well known. I don't think even you've heard of her, or Geeta Hariharan, or you have. Okay, great. But you know what I meant to say? What I meant to say was that, so we get a lot of people who may not be known, and they could be totally greenhorns. So what happens is that we put greenhorns in conversation with people who are of similar nature, and then this discussion continues. So when it comes to our exhibitions, here again the focus is on the Pan-Himalayan arts and crafts. I mean, no point giving an exhibition space to Fab India. They don't need us, but Chitku would need us. Ladakh Weaves and Looms would need us. So we try to bring in books, we try to bring in authors, we try to bring in exhibitions, everything which would not normally get the limelight, or would not normally come into forefront. So that's how we curate WOW. And it is driven by a lot of our young volunteers. So you have volunteers from the local colleges, volunteers from DU, volunteers from JNU, who stitch this together. This year, for example, the entire debate, which is called the WOW Mantrana debate, is organized by the local DAV college. And they've come out with some fantastic subjects of debate, including India should recognize Tibet and Taiwan. Now it's a fantastic subject to discuss on whether patriotism goes against Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So a lot of these things come up, a lot of young, I find it fascinating when I see young boys and girls coming out discussing. And one other thing which WOW addresses is an intergenerational communication. You see, other than talking to our own children and grandchildren, we have stopped talking. I mean, even they find it difficult to talk to us. We find it difficult to talk to them. So I think WOW is also a platform where you have General Cardozo talking to a lot of young NCC, cadets. You have a very nice, for 3 days, it's a very nice festival where people of all ages, all incomes, and it's not just a festival in English, because I made a conscious policy of ensuring that at least half the sessions would be in Hindi and regional languages, a special forum for Kendriya Vidyalaya students, so that, because another typical problem is that, when you have these literature festivals, it's all elite. So it's a conscious effort at getting everybody involved in the festival, which I think is the USP, if you allow me to use that term.
Yes, of course. Thanks. Well, incidentally, I'm also from Kendriya Vidyalaya.
Okay, great. So we'll have you. I'll recommend you, if you have the time, we'll make you a judge in the Kendriya Vidyalaya debate. This year, if you have the time, it'll be a pleasure.
I'll find out time for that, definitely.
Yeah, great. That'll be really wonderful. Yeah. In fact, these subjects of debates are this time it's an online education. Last time we had this, the Kendriya Vidyalaya debate was cricket ne baki khelon ko run out kar diya.
Oh yeah.
And both had the debate was ki Bollywood ne Hindi ko abad ya barbad kiya. So again we in fact the other very interesting thing that we do is a WOW Populi, which is a debate amongst the MPs. Again, on a subject which is interesting. I won't use the word controversial, but interesting. For instance, year one we had a debate which said that the best debates occur outside the parliament.
Okay.
So because the parliament, you don't get the time to debate. So because your time is limited by the political party that you represent. So if you come from a bigger party, you get more time. So your time in the parliament does not depend on the quality of your debate. It depends on which party you represent, right? So therefore, a lot of people who come from smaller parties always complain that they have not got, even in terms of a rebuttal, they'll get 7 to 12 minutes, whereas if you are from a mainstream political party, you may be getting half an hour for a rebuttal. And last year we discussed the subject, English is also an Indian language. So this is how we sort of curate our debates, try to make it interesting, involve everyone, and so that's it. And that's what we try to do. And I would urge all those who follow USP to also register for us at www.valueofwords.org. So that will be nice. And I'll send the link to Ujjwal, and I hope that you can all join. Yeah. This year it's totally online because we can't do a physical meet. So it will be an online event, and we look forward to one of the interesting sessions here is going to be a dialogue among professors of Hindi across the world. So there are professors of Hindi in Bulgaria, in Holland, in Canada, England, Fiji, Mauritius. So they're all getting together to talk about Hindi and Hindustani across the world. And we're also planning an exhibition of newspapers published in Hindi and Hindustani before 1947 across the world. And this was basically done by the soldiers of the First World War I, World War II, and the Azad Hind Fauj. So, in fact, a lot of our history is so forgotten, Ujjwal, a lot of it is so forgotten that, I look forward to, my superannuation so that I'll have a lot of time,
all the time to do that.
All the time to do that.
Yes. Okay, Sanjeev, coming back to the academy. Now, go back to 1985. As you now walk...
go back to 1985.
Sorry?
I said, let's both go back to 1985. Yeah. Okay.
Well, if you remember, it was another Chopra, Mr. R.N. Chopra.
Yes, it was another Chopra. It was R.N. Chopra.
Now we have another Chopra there. So I was just asking you that when you walk around the ramparts, do the memories flood? And what is the difference between the probationers of that time and the probationers coming in now? What do you see as different? And that's something which I was very curious to know, and I'm sure our audience would also like to know that.
See, one is that they are no longer probationers, we call them officer trainees. So it's a change of nomenclature.
All right.
I think more importantly, Ujjwal, I think the change is not just with the OTs, it's also with the faculty. I would like to believe that we are far more open, far more friendly, if one would use that word. But let's say that, it's become a more collegial atmosphere since the time when we were there. And I think one of the reasons is that, till that time, people who were coming to the academy many of them were not opting to come to the academy. Right. So, people were posted to the academy. So after Dr. Saxena and Mr. Yugandhar, in fact, the credit goes to Mr. B.N. Yugandhar, he felt that he consciously opted to come to the academy. Mr. Yugandhar consciously opted to come to the academy. And after him, every single director has opted to come to the academy. He's not been sent to the academy. And I think that makes a lot of difference. 100% of my faculty wants to be here. They are happy being here. And, when the faculty is happy, when the director is happy, then even the horses are happy.
I'm going to butt in and share a joke with you. This came on WhatsApp.
No, that's totally false. That's not true. That's just one of those typical Fauji's,
yes.
Feeling happy about their thing. That's not true. You see, even in the friendliest of halls, no RI can come up to the director and say that
I know that. But it was a good joke.
Yes, it's a good joke. We can laugh at it. No, but I think, what has happened is that the officer trainees are today very, very mature, and they are more open. You see, remember in our time, you had this ladies block and this men's block and this faculty. So all that is gone. So I think there's far greater openness. There's far greater willingness to address questions. The officer trainees can ask us almost anything. And we're also trying to explain to them that, look, the relationship with the political executive is non-adversarial. Remember, we were taught in a time when we still had a little bit of that ICS, mold that you are an officer, you must be like this and you must be like that. And so today, what we are trying to inculcate in our officers is that, look, you have to be confident everywhere. you must be able to go and attend a meeting with the World Bank and at the same time address a meeting of the self-help groups. So you must learn how to eat with a fork and knife, but you must be more comfortable sitting on the floor and eating, eating on the pattal and eating on the plate. There's a lot of emphasis on regional languages. I mean, every Friday, once the course starts, we have a state day coming in. We all dress up in that in the state dress. At this time, we're also planning to start Friday ethnic dressing in the academy. So, a lot of things are happening and a lot of change is happening, which is very good. And in fact, the sort of discussions and dialogues that we now have, I could not have imagined asking these sorts of questions to my director at that time. So that, and I think it's also a question of change. One is that and a fundamental change that has happened is that earlier it was knowledge, skills, and attitude. That the academy taught us certain things, that we needed to learn IPC, we needed to learn CRPC. Today we don't need to do that. Today it's attitude. Today the whole thing is about attitude. It's about teamwork. It's about working together. In fact, the message which I wrote for the young entrants who are going to enter the academy is that your brilliance has been tested by UPSC. I cannot add to your brilliance. You already very bright. What I need to, and what we all need to work together is team building, is to network, is to work together. A little bit of humility, a little bit of patience, a little bit of listening ability, and the willingness to learn that we can pick up things from everywhere. So that is what has to. So focus has moved from knowledge to attitude. And I think that makes a lot of difference. Because today you frankly don't need to know IPC, CRPC, any state landlord, because you can all get it from Google, Baba. What you only think that we can transact with each other is a positive and a happy relationship, is a positive and happy transaction. So that's the big difference which I noticed from our times to now. Of course, physical infrastructure is much better now, and that also reflects on the financial status of the country. The OTs are much better paid. Hardly paid anything. It's embarrassing. Not embarrassing, but we can discuss our salaries. We spend all of it on food and on other things in the evening, so.
Great. A word about the Maps of India project. I read your article on
I was actually hoping that, I was wondering, why haven't you asked me this question? Because I have only 12 minutes to discuss this.
I read about Manipur, Tripura, the article you wrote, and I found it fascinating. Yeah. So I'm sure you must tell the audience about Maps of India. It's a wonderful thing which you're doing.
You see, what I felt was, that, when you read any history of our country, we've looked at it. Guha, for instance, looks at life. Gandhi, after Gandhi, he's written tomes. Then you have Sunil Khilnani, who's written about the idea of India. Now, they've all talked about India as India. But India is actually not just, it's also a union of states. And each state, in fact, what I realized was that the map of India changes every few years, and it has been changing every few years. And it's very important that we've been able to adjust ourselves to this, because when and in fact, the Congress had always promised linguistic reorganization of states. Ambedkar had also written on linguistic reorganization of states. But the process through which this happened is a fascinating journey. It's an absolutely fascinating journey. First, about the integration of states, which happened from 47 to 50, which Sardar Patel was able to bring about. And remember, Ujjwal, that the Britishers were very, very clever. They actually spared no effort to balkanize our country. And in fact, increasingly scholarship is now coming to the fact that till about 1940s, there was hardly any talk even about the partition of the country. It was the last few years that all this happened, but that's a long story. We can't get into that. What fascinated me was that, you see, when you look at Punjab, Gujarat, Maharashtra, the Northeast, how these states have evolved. In fact, the thought came to me was that, having worked in Gorkhaland, having worked in all these places, one realized that, every ethnic nationality, every linguistic group in this country has been wanting a certain territory in which to assert itself, in which to feel comfortable. So a Maratha could feel more comfortable being in an area where everybody speaks Marathi. And as a matter of fact, it is important that, our public discourse is in the language that we are born with, that we speak with. So that's how this journey started. So I started writing about 1947. I started reading about Radcliffe, about the number of lives that were lost, about how in what haste this decision was taken. And then India became so rigid after that, after the bloodbath of partition. It became so rigid that the Congress felt that it cannot really open up or rake up these issues of language and caste and religion and all these things. But you can't hide these things under the carpet. So that's how the first agitation started. Then, and as a matter of fact, when Andhra state was conceded in 1952, that was the beginning of the formation of small states. So I've traced that how the fast of Potti Sri Ramalu actually led to so that happened. Then Andhra state happened. Then Andhra Pradesh was made. Then Gujarat, and the fight that you've had over Bombay. Then one realizes that every capital city has also been a source of fighting. Calcutta also. Just as Gujaratis and Maharashtra, they had this big tussle over Bombay. There was a tussle over Calcutta as well, because Burroughs, who was then the governor of Bengal, he wanted to divide Hindu Calcutta and a Muslim Calcutta. There was a fight later on over Madras, because both Andhra Pradesh and Madras state, Tamil Nadu, wanted it. Chandigarh, we've always been in fight. So every state has had some very unique constellation about it. And another factor that comes out is that we have forgotten our regional leaders. The discourse in the country, and because of you can say the so-called national press, all the discussion is around what Nehru did, what Patel did, what so-and-so did, what Morarji Desai did. So very few people in our country know about regional leaders. I mean, very few of us know about Nagaland, about the contribution which Sakire made to Nagaland. And I came across some fascinating people. And I must mention, one of the most fascinating persons I've come across in this journey of maps. And this is a person called Major Bob Cutting. Now, the life of Major Bob Cutting is absolutely fantastic. Like our batchmate Mueva, he's a Tangkhul Naga.
Yep.
Now, Bob Cutting started off as a school teacher in 1940s, and must have been very good. And so the then deputy commissioner said that, why don't you join the Viceroy's commission and join the army? So he joined the British army, and he rose to the rank of a major there in the army. But he came back and he joined the Indian Frontier Administrative Service. Then from the Indian Frontier Administrative Service, just look after Nefa and all these areas, he was seconded to the Assam Rifles. From Assam Rifles, he went in 1952, and together, and with the detachment of Assam Rifles, he went to Tawang, took over that monastery, and told them there is no need to pay tribute to Lhasa.
Okay.
And he and the governor of Assam, they agreed to do it. In fact, they were called to Delhi and given a little reprimand by the Ministry of External Affairs, because that area was under the MEA. So anyway, but he was a great, obviously was good in his work. So Assam Rifles, then he moved on to Nagaland. And when he was the DC of Mokokchung, that is the time when 2 Naga conventions were held, which went against FISO. And they said, no, we want to be a part of India. We are agreeable to joining the Indian Union. So that's how by 1973, the Nagaland became a separate state, and it happened. Now he became the Chief Secretary of Nagaland, and later on he became our ambassador to Burma. It was the first tribal who became our ambassador to Burma. Now look at this. He's a person who's distinguished himself as a teacher. He's a person who's distinguished himself as an army officer, as an intrepid person. He's been a good administrator. He's been a good diplomat. Now he happens to be a Tangkhul Naga in Manipur, which means that nobody's going to give him recognition. The Nagas don't want to recognize him because he's not a Naga from Nagaland. In Manipur, because he represents a minority tribe, the Metis and the Kukis will not want to recognize him, and yet the contribution of this man to India is phenomenal. Yeah. And how many of us have known about him? So, I want to bring such people to the fore. I want to bring people whose contribution to this country has been much more than has been acknowledged in the mainstream media or in the mainstream press, because these are people who are unknown. and people who've done such tremendous work for this country. And when I look at Tripura, can you imagine? I mean, this week you read about Tripura. I mean, Tripura, with only 17 members in a 60-member house, they agreed to set up the Tripura Tribal Development Council under the 6th schedule, which meant that they practically gave away their authority over 68% area. Now, it requires great maturity, both on the part of the Congress and the Communist leadership at that time. Now, these are things which must be acknowledged. These are things which we must acknowledge, how we have been able to manage the contradictions within the country, because you have a neighboring country which was not able to manage this.
Yes.
Just at the time when we were dividing, we were not dividing is not the right word, when we were agreeing to the adjustment of a boundaries, Pakistan was making one unit. So Pakistan actually demolished Punjab and Sindh and Northwest Frontier Province and Baluchistan and brought it as one unit. I mean, the International Mother Languages Day that we celebrate on the 22nd of February every year is because the Pakistan Army had opened fire in Dhaka University because they said only Urdu will be the language of Pakistan. Oh, yes. So, I mean, when you compare what is happening here, when you compare how, I think as far as handling ethnicities is concerned, as far as handling linguistic diversity is concerned, there is no country in the world which has done better than us. And I think it's a tribute to almost all the to across the political spectrum. People have agreed. I mean, political leadership has agreed that reorganization of internal boundaries is something which a nation must keep looking at. Later on, I'll also be talking about how it has not been possible to accept statehood for, say, Gurkhas, or for, say, Bodos, or for, say, many other issues. And then, again, within the formation of the state, India has to be creative to find places or spaces where their political assertions can find a normal democratic assertion. Yeah. That's how I would like to put it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's a very fascinating project you had, Sanjeev, and we are coming almost to the end of our tete-a-tete. What is the message you would like to give to the youth of this country?
Thank you. I think I just want the youth of this country to talk to each other, to talk to everybody around them, to listen, to learn, and to lead. I think you cannot lead the nation unless you learn, and you cannot learn unless you listen. And when you listen to good music, you listen to poetry, you listen to art, you listen to words around you. And I think that's the role which with an open mind. I think it's very important also for the young generation and for all of us to enter into non-adversarial conversations. I think I'd like to end by saying that the one message that I'd like to give, which I tell my probationers also, which I tell my volunteers involved, which I tell everybody, is that a society grows and develops when it learns to acknowledge that there will be differences, but those differences have to be handled in a non-adversarial manner. That just because somebody is not agreeing with me, I don't have to break his head, but I have to engage with his head more than I am now, so that I understand him, he understands me, and if we still can't understand each other, we can still agree to have a cup of coffee or a glass of milk or a glass of water at a mutually, so we make ourselves, so we understand that yes, there will be differences, but those differences can be accommodated and adjusted, and that's what I've said. The whole story of India is a story of assertion, aspiration, and adjustment. So that's how I'd like to end with.
Wonderful, Sanjeev. In fact, it's been fascinating talking to you. And I must say this, that in USP we have, we operate on 3 levels of our minds. That is the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the network. And the message which we give, the key message is eksham, that is ekagrata, that is concentration, kshama, that is forgiveness, and parokar, that is doing good for others. So the shama part is that accommodation which you're talking about, and assertion, of course, your assertion comes from the ekagrata, that is concentration on it, and of course the parokar is the third thing which you said. So wonderful. I mean, it's beautifully dovetailing in with the USP of USP. So thank you very much, Sanjeev.
Right.
And
Thanks. It was wonderful. Yeah, great.
and let's hope to meet soon. And let's hope that all this Corona business goes away as fast as possible, so that we can meet up. And I would like to come to the value of words.
Certainly, you and all your listeners are most welcome. Certainly online, and hopefully also in the physical world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.